Hello there, and welcome to the third episode of the Motivation Podcast. My name is Sanne.
And I am Elina.
And we are your hosts today.
I've been feeling sick of chasing all these foolish expectations. I need help, I need advice. Listen to our podcast.
Today's episode is all about perfectionism, and as this is a topic that hits close to home for both of us, we decided that we would discuss it amongst ourselves. So, welcome us!
So, to start out, maybe it's good to talk a bit about what perfectionism is exactly. So, Elina, how would you define perfectionism for yourself?
I guess I would just say you want to do everything right, and you want to do it perfectly, which often is impossible, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. That's basically how perfectionism is often defined. You are a perfectionist if you set the bar impossibly high, and then you also sort of tie your self-worth to the extent to which you are able to actualize these standards that you have. And this can translate to many different aspects of your life. How would you say that it has impacted you?
I think it really comes forward in two things. So first, my academic work. So when I'm doing assignments, writing essays, stuff like that, I really want to do it well. And also I've always wanted to get good grades. Like if I would get a 6, I'm definitely disappointed and maybe even a bit annoyed. When I get an 8, I'm like, okay, that's fine. When I get a 7, I'm like, okay. But so that's been a big thing for me. And I also, I start working on things on time usually, but then just the end part, I keep on, changing things or feeling like my work is inadequate. Like, the more I work on it, the more I feel like it's trash, basically. Yeah, so that really sucks. And also, the other part of my life would be, my appearance, because I'm really self-aware, and I kind of always feel judged, and, when my hair looks a bit weird, and to me it always does, of course, then I feel very awkward when I go outside or even inside. I would even change outfits a couple of times a day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's quite intense. So I think those are the two biggest areas.
Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, it's related to your academic performance, and then on the other hand, it's also related to how people perceive you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. So I would say for me, it's mainly about having control over how I see myself and how other people see me. And just always this feeling of not being happy with just good enough. It has to be better, and there's this constant feeling of having to impress people. Which is ridiculous because no one is actually paying attention to you.
Yeah. Do you also get that, I don't know if it's just me, but when I'm working on this essay, and like I told, at the end I kind of feel like, oh, it's bad, and then I feel like I will disappoint the teacher, which is I spent so much time on this assignment, so that's insane. But I don't know if you get that too, sort of like you are always disappointing yourself or someone else.
Yeah. I completely understand that feeling. Especially if you know someone well and they also have vocalized their expectations of you, then that can cause a lot of pressure. On the one hand, it's really nice because they value you, they see that you are working hard. It's a confidence boost. But then on the other hand, you can never win. You can only lose and disappoint someone, or you maintain what they already were expecting, which is a lot of pressure because you're constantly afraid of disappointing people. And this actually brings me to two types of perfectionism that are frequently discussed in the literature. So there is adaptive perfectionism and maladaptive perfectionism. And the first one, adaptive perfectionism, is also often called excellence-seeking perfectionism, which is basically where you set these ultra-high standards for your work and you want it to be as good as it can be. And this can also mean that you apply your perfectionism to other people around you.
Oh, okay.
And then there's maladaptive perfectionism, or also called failure-avoidant perfectionism, which is more so fixated on not failing, being scared that people think that your work is not good enough, and therefore you yourself not being seen as good enough.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of split this up a bit further into like the three main types. So self-oriented perfectionism, where you have your own high standards. Other-oriented perfectionism, where you have high standards for other people around you. And socially prescribed perfectionism, so thinking that other people have high standards for you. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of see like where on this like, spectrum, if you will, where we fall.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, it might be a bit of a mix, but for me, it is sadly the more maladaptive side, as in, fixating on not feeling like, for most things, I know I will not fail, but I just want to do well. So that's more like I seek excellence in that. But with that, there is this cognition in my head that people are always not satisfied with my work, or that I'm not satisfied with it. That's a very negative feeling, and it's not very nice to have that all the time.
So would you say then that your perfectionism comes from external factors mostly, or?
No. I mean, I am my own biggest critic. It's like my family and my friends are like, why would you talk to yourself like that? Like, you would never say that to us. And I'm like, yeah, fair, that's true. But I think most of it is from within. But then there's this, like, from within is this idea that other people are judging me, right? Even though this might not be true. Like, they might, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. So it does have to do with my perception of what others think of me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like for me it's mostly the same. Like on the one hand, I feel like I have very high standards and I really want to accomplish something. But I would say it's mostly socially prescribed perfectionism. So like the feeling that others have these very high standards that you have to constantly own up to, and otherwise you'll be judged in some sort of way. But then also with group work, for example, I feel like I can also really get into other-oriented perfectionism. So
yes,
having very high standards for other people, and this can also be a challenge in group settings.
Yeah, it's like in group settings, you naturally I tend to take control, because it's always like this, right? When you have this one person who cares the most, and they will end up doing most of the work, which is very frustrating, by the way, because you really do want to have that control, because you feel like I want to get a good grade, right? I want to do deliver something well, and if people don't take initiative at all, then I'm like, oh, I gotta do it, because I don't want to do it the day before the deadline. It's not like my anxiety will not be able to handle that, right? So it's a very you have to give out some things to other people, or like, of course, a lot of things when you work together, but it's a very tricky thing, and you always, even if they do work, you tend to go and correct some of it because of your own standards, and sometimes I feel like it is necessary, but it can also feel like you're a bit mean or something.
Yeah, I agree. Like I used to, when we had to write essays with other people, I used to like go over their parts and rewrite like 90% of it.
Oh, okay.
Rephrase all sentences, and like I was like awful, and like especially in these last years, I really tried to be more relaxed about it and not care as much.
Yeah,
it can definitely put a lot of pressure on relationships that you have with people. And I don't think I was the most fun person to work with in that sense, because I was very critical of how other people wrote their parts.
Yeah, I guess if that's something you really have, then it's important to learn to dial that down a notch, because, like you say, it might actually harm relationships. And of course, your standard to you feels good, like, but maybe other people think your work is trash as well, exactly. Right? So you kind of have to, take a bit of a different perspective on that. But I understand it's hard, and like
and it's also a balancing act. Like of course, a good grade is really nice, but then what does it cost you?
Exactly.
Like what sacrifices do you make?
And up to this day, the sacrifices are still too big. At least for me, like I care too much about things that I know, like after it's done, you won't care about it as much anymore. I remember in high school, like I would literally do work for people because honestly, they would throw in stuff in Google Translate, for French. I was like, these sentences.
We're not doing this.
We're not doing this. So in that sense, I felt it was justified, but maybe in other cases it's not, because you work with people that are also intelligent people. They do their best Of course, most of them, also other people like to just benefit from you as well, which you allow because you want to have the control, and then you still get mad that they don't do work. So it's a very difficult cycle.
Yeah, it's like a really weird balance between, on the one hand, wanting people to do a lot, and then on the other hand, wanting to do everything by yourself.
Yeah, and I do have to say, like, well, for this project, because we're recording this podcast for our project, well, we've been working together, and we're both, as we hear now, very perfectionistic. But this is like, I feel like you're the person I can work with the best, like, so far in my life, which is pretty amazing because we both have high standards, we both have expectations, and we are not afraid to tell each other feedback or something. So it really works.
Yeah, I agree. And you don't have to worry whether the other person is actually doing something.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't constantly have to check,
yeah.
Are you done? Did you do this? So yeah, I feel like working with other perfectionists definitely helps. And people can have very different work styles, and they don't always match up.
Yeah, but of course you have to learn to work with all sorts of people. But I would say that in this case, you usually work with people that are quite different from you. And in this case, it's a nice experience for change, you know?
Yeah, I used to really not like working in groups because it was always a bad experience. Like, I always ended up doing everything and stressing out and then confronting the group about their bad behavior. But yeah, once you learn to kind of let it go a bit more, and when you are able to trust that other people are actually doing something, that really helps as well.
Yeah, and of course you can tell people how you feel, right? Depends on the group, of course. But it's good to talk about these things. Because if you tell people that, well, this is how you experience it and it causes you a lot of stress, then other people might think, oh, let me take some initiative, you know? I think it's a good idea to just bring it out there, you know?
So I have a question for you. This is something that I've been thinking about recently. I always used to think that being a perfectionist was like I wouldn't say a perfect quality, but it was like up there, you know, like it was something that I was like secretly a little bit proud of, because I felt like it kind of made me, I don't want to say better, but I would be like, I'm a perfectionist, you know. There's this feeling of I want to do everything good, but like, is it actually a good trait to have? Is it actually something to be proud of?
I think, like we said before, it can go two ways. It can be good in the sense that you try hard, you want to deliver a good quality product, which of course is good if that's something you value, or in the system, for example, a school system, that's something that is valued. So I would say it's a positive thing. However, we talked about the consequences, and if the consequences are, like, if the benefits are not outweighing the disadvantages, or for me personally, it has taken a toll, and it makes you unhappy. And it does really depend, like, yes, it can be a good trait if it's not taking over your life, and if it doesn't feed into these negative feelings. So yeah, maybe for some people that have the energy and that do it for a reason that is purely like they want to do good and they want to put in the effort and they can afford to do so without feeling burned out, for example, without having the feeling of I delivered something that is not good after all. So if you have this, what was it, excellence seeking, but you do accept the end product, then maybe it's, yeah, then I would say it's a good thing. Yeah. But the other way, I for me personally, it doesn't feel as a good thing. Although, what you just pointed out as well, there's this ironic thing where you feel like you're a failure and everything you hand in is not good enough, but you do feel, and this sounds very arrogant, that you are better than other people, which is what you see when you do group work.
Yeah.
Even though, like, you have this crippling anxiety, and for me personally, I have quite, well, a negative view of myself. I still have this sort of sense of superiority, at least in some academic work, which is insane, and I am aware of this, and it's such a paradox. Yeah. I'm like, how? But yeah, that's something that I realized recently. I was like, damn, that's crazy.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that. Like, on the one hand, feeling so insecure about your work and not wanting to share it with others, and like being scared that it's not good enough. And then on the other hand, also having this idea like, oh, but I'm able to rewrite your words because my words are better in some sort of sense than your words, which is weird to think about.
It's really weird because it's such an opposite thing. But I do think like it's also something you don't really want to say because, like I said, it sounds quite arrogant, right?
Yeah.
But I do think like just talking about this, it's good because it's weird and it's nothing to be ashamed of. And I think as we both recognize this, I'm sure that many other people will have the same sort of experience as well. So it might not be pretty, but it's just the way it is. Yeah.
So, Elina, for you, what causes perfectionism?
I think it's impossible for me to pinpoint where it comes from. Like, I'm sure part of it is like this broader personality, a bit more neurotic personality. And maybe, of course, stuff that happens in childhood. Let's not go into that. But I was always doing well as a kid. Like, I'm relatively smart, right? You realize that at some point because in primary school, you're in a class with many different children of all different levels. So you know, okay, I'm not dumb, whatever. I'm doing good. And then you create this expectations from your parents, from your peers. You might be called nerds sometimes, you know. And it starts to create this sort of image that actually others are also expecting things from you. Like, especially in high school, that really starts becoming more salient, where you're always getting certain grades. For example, I was very good at French in high school, and I would get straight A's in the first couple of years. And at some point, people expect that from you as well. And if you know that people, like you said, if it's vocalized, right, if this is out there, then you know, okay, it's an actual expectation, so I have to meet that. And if you don't, you feel disappointed because something is just going wrong, right, in your image of yourself as well. So I guess that's something that not necessarily causes it, but once it starts to happen, it does maintain it, you know, this expectation that you have of yourself and of others. But the actual like cause, who knows? Like, is an interplay of so many things. I'm not sure.
I think it's so interesting what you're saying, and it also really relates to what Joelle and Julius were mentioning in their episode as well. Our self-concepts and our ideas of how other people perceive us, I think that really are very crucial in the way that they shape our behavior.
Yeah.
Like I think people really have this need to like be consistent, and not being able to conform exactly to how you think that people see you is scary, because you've created this, and it doesn't even matter what kind of identity it is. It can even be like a bad characteristic trait of you. But once you know that this is my identity, this is how people see me, steering away from that is scary, because then who am I?
Yeah, and then you get into the fundamental questions of life. I agree with that. Like, this consistency is definitely driving all sorts of behaviors, including procrastination, perfectionism, and anything in between. I was just thinking, do you also have this, like, the compliments don't feel as compliments because it's kind of what you need to get. Just like when you get a good grade, you might feel happy for like a couple of minutes. It's a confirmation of what should be there. Whereas like getting a negative grade or like critical feedback, it feels like a knife in your heart, because you know that you think you have failed the expectation, and it also kind of dials that. Like, for me, like a compliment, sometimes I can't really accept it.
You kind of easily brush them off, right?
Yeah. It's, so that's also sad.
I think that's so typical for perfectionists as well. Like, in the way that you see yourself, it's so easy to get caught up in that one negative comment that someone made next to all those positive comments that you've got.
Yeah.
That one negative comment will stick out and haunt you for like days and days.
Definitely.
It also made me think of this study where they gave children different types of compliments, right? If I remember correctly, they were doing a puzzle exercise. And then half of the children were told, "You're so smart, that you solved this exercise. It's so good of you." And then the other half of the children were told, not "you were so smart," but they were told, "You worked so hard." And instead of like giving a compliment on a certain fixed or seemingly fixed character trait, they complimented them on their actions, on like working hard. And they found that the children who were complimented on just a trait, so you're so intelligent, those children later on didn't want to do the more difficult puzzle. Because if you already have achieved this like status of, oh, you're smart, then you don't want to lose that status.
So yeah, I've heard about this before as well, and I think that this kind of praising of children as well can really shape them, and it's much better to say things like you have worked very hard for this, well done, instead of saying, oh, you're such a smart. And that counts for a lot of different things as well. It's not just about intelligence, of course, but as intelligence is such a big thing for us in our society, it's definitely something to keep in mind as well. Maybe if people are listening and they're going into education or something like that, it's definitely something to look up. Yeah,
I think it really ties into this whole idea of risk aversion, which is of course way grander than just receiving compliments. But just like when you have something, people are scared of losing it.
Yeah.
And it can translate into many different aspects of your life.
Yeah, definitely. Like, for anyone who hasn't read the work of Kahneman, Tversky, it's very interesting, and it really shows us, for example, if we have this old, I don't know, what would you have in your house? Some old artifact or something, and you want to sell it, the buyer will probably just want to give you 10 euros, and you're like, oh no, this is so much sentimental value, right? This is a very important thing, and you want, I don't know, 100 euros. And it really shows how we want to hold on to these things, and that we think it's worth much more than any other person around us would think. It's an interesting connection there, yeah.
Something that's also interesting to talk about, which I was kind of reminded of by what you're saying, is how perfectionism is valued in society. So also intelligence, there's a lot of emphasis on being smart and getting good grades, and I feel like as society is getting more and more competitive, especially with the rise of Instagram, there's so much pressure on having a perfect life, on having status, having good looks, and I think that really causes people to become more perfectionistic as well. There's so much pressure of performing that you also, in that sense, you don't want to be less than other people.
Yeah, exactly, because for example the Instagram and these people might do that for a living and spend all their time on making things look good, and this is what perfectionistic people tend to do, is setting unrealistic standards for themselves to have this perfect life. This is beyond academics, of course. I mean, if you really have this trait and it's everywhere, then you might feel like you have to do everything right, and it includes having the children at the right moment, buy a house at the right moment, get the perfect partner, and of course you find out that relationships aren't perfect, and I'm sure things will go wrong there as well. So it's really something that definitely gets worse by all the media, especially because media represents a very small amount of people, and usually the people that are at different ends of the curve, the prettiest people. I would say, when you walk on the streets, how many times do you walk and really see something that's gorgeous, a very beautiful person? It doesn't happen that often, but when you turn on the television, immediately all you see
everywhere. Yeah.
So I do think that definitely in this society, children might feel more pressured, and not just academics, but all parts of life, which is a terrifying thought. So yeah.
No, I agree. It really sets this very unhealthy high standard for people. And I think the more you see those type of standards, the more you start comparing yourself. I think that's also a really big thing with being perfectionistic. You're constantly comparing your work to the expectations that other people might have, to what other people do.
Yeah.
And I think that's also when it becomes maladaptive, when you can't just say, I want to do something that is good in my eyes, but it has to measure up to certain unrealistic standards.
And there's always someone who's going to be better than you, right?
That's the annoying thing as well.
Yeah. So...
Well, maybe it's interesting to relate that to the fear of failure. so for me personally, I was always really scared of not being the best. Like if I wasn't the best, if I didn't win in a debate, if I didn't get as high of a grade as my best friend, then I would be messed up, man. I would have so much my whole value was used to be based on how do I compare to other people. And I don't know, I feel like this whole idea of not being able to fail is just really harmful. Like, I feel like you learn so much from failing. I feel like we should celebrate failure more.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is something that for every parent or every person in education or something like that, it's something to encourage, because without trying, you'll never know, right? And it's unlikely that you'll do everything right in one time, which is something that at least I have as well. For example, like you said, like for me, I failed my first driving exam. And that really shattered me because I was used to doing everything right, like in one go, and that's what I thought of myself. So that's something like I would think back to that moment for maybe half a year and still get that same nauseous feeling of failure, you know? So that for me was a very big moment where I noticed that. And it's so, like, many people go, like, do their exams a couple of times, right? It's very normal. It's especially, I was quite nervous, of course, because of this fear of failure. I was very nervous and it just didn't go well because of my anxiety. It got too bad. And looking back, I just realized, I could have given myself some more credit, you know, and just accept that you failed and you're going to try again and you're going to do fine. And yes, the second time it did go much better. But even after getting my license, it really shattered my confidence insanely.
I can imagine, yeah.
I didn't want to drive. It was... And that just goes to show that if that's something that's ingrained for you for like 18 years, then... Yeah, if you, like, as a child are more... If you're taught more that failure is part of life and that's okay, these things might not come to such a point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, like, having... The more experiences you have with failure, and the more you know what that feeling is like, the better you are able to deal with it. And it just... if you always succeed, and if you're always top of the class, then that one time that you are not, that becomes like such a big scary moment.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's like no one ever thinks of you like, oh, that one time you failed. And also, like, you yourself, if you're looking at someone else and they didn't pass their driver's test the first time, you wouldn't mind. Like, you would be like, oh, it's okay. Not everyone does. It's not a big a deal.
Yeah.
But then you yourself, you've set those standards so high. Yeah. It's really really typical.
Yeah, it is typical. Sadly. Yeah.
Yeah. That's also like something that I try to do whenever I kind of start to spiral down this perfectionistic like thought pattern. I really try to think, okay, well, suppose that this was happening to someone else, what would I say to them? Or like, how would I react if someone else was experiencing this?
Yeah, I think that's very, very good advice. It's also something you hear a lot, right? From, would you say this to your friend? Or
yeah.
And I think it's very powerful, at least to think about. Because why be so hard on yourself if you would never do that to anyone else? It doesn't mean that you're immediately going to change, but it is good. Yeah, I think it's a very powerful thing to...
So what would you say are consequences of perfectionism in your experience?
Negative emotions, such as disappointment in yourself, anger when you get a bad grade, or like bad in your eyes, right? Working inefficiently because you work on things too long, without getting much better results, probably. At least I see that around me. Some friends of mine or my boyfriend, they work on it like a couple of hours less and they get similar results, and that really, that messes me up too, because I'm like, I worked so hard on this.
Yeah.
But that's probably because at some point it doesn't really add much more. For me, stress, like, I am so stressed, and it really has like a very, very great impact on me and other parts of my life that are a bit more personal as well. But I would just say it makes me even more tired and more stressed, which stress just it kills you. It doesn't only kills you mentally, like my whole body is just physically tired. My muscles are giving up, it's just for me it is a very it's a very big consequence of that, partially of that.
It's really draining. It really wears you out. I would say for me, perfectionism really leads to procrastination, which then leads to a lot of stress as well. This also relates to what Joelle was saying. It's also, in a sense, like a self-protective mechanism, I guess, because then you can say, well, it's not me. I procrastinated. If I hadn't procrastinated, it would have been much better. So in that sense, it's also a way to deal with, I guess, those perfectionistic feelings of it has to be perfect. Because you kind of make an excuse for yourself.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, we talked about procrastination before with Joel, but I think it's a very different cause. And this, again, just shows how diverse the causes for different problems are.
Yeah, I agree. The causes for the problems are different, but also the solutions for problems are different. And as we are almost nearing the end of the episode, let's end on some golden tips that could maybe help some of you if you're also perfectionistic. So what are you doing in your life to help with your perfectionistic tendencies?
This year, I've really been trying to allow myself to just, lie down for a couple of hours if I'm so tired and I have such a headache or something. Whereas usually I will go through that, which is, my friends, not a very smart thing to do. So yeah, I think for anyone, right, it's about balance. Also allow yourself to do things that give you energy, and if it goes on too long without that, then you won't have energy anymore, and that's kind of the point that I reached, and I can tell you it's not a very great place to be.
Yeah, I was also wondering, like we've been talking about having this like voice kind of nagging you and be like, oh, it's not good enough, it's not good enough. How do you deal with that?
I can't say like I'm already dealing with it like in a very good way that I can say, guys, do this and you'll be fine. But I do think trying to realize that these are just thoughts. Yeah, you can even just write them down, right? Just write down what your head is telling you and just be like, well, this can't be right. And also make a list next to it with stuff you like about yourself or things you are proud of. Like, I think it's a very small thing that you can try. And yeah, and those negative thoughts, of course, they're not just going to disappear. But the more you kind of focus on them, the more they will grow and the more, they will put you down. Yeah,
shifting the focus to what did I actually do and what did I achieve today, that can be like a very, I feel like, a healthy way of dealing with that.
Also, actively avoiding these thoughts is not good either. Like, you have to acknowledge them, but then don't let them take over, right? So it's just kind of trying to accept that they might be there. And that's hard and that's weird, of course, but it's something you can train. And then also focus on the positive things so they can grow.
It also really reminds me of like mindfulness, right? And meditation. For me, especially when I'm really stressed, I kind of tend to forget that I have a body. I feel like I'm just a mind working. Like you forget to eat, you like go to sleep at like way later than you wanted to go to bed. And just like having this routine in your life and having some kind of like system of automatic, structured actions really helps to ground you as well. And I don't know, for me that really takes away a lot of stress as well. Like just knowing what you have to do on certain points of the day.
And also, like you said, if you lose that connection to your body, like our body, for me, I've learned that my body, it really tells me when I need to slow down. I still need to learn how to detect that a bit earlier and to listen to it earlier, but still it does give me a very clear sign of, Eline, You went too far. You need to chill down. And it kind of forces me, to do that. So I think for anyone who is not really aware of this connection or doesn't think about that a lot, it's interesting to kind of start to notice what's happening in your body as well, connected to what's happening in your head. And it's very powerful, and it can really, it can help you, I think, even notice, for example, stress earlier than you think.
Yeah, and once you experience stress, don't keep it to yourself. Like, talk to other people about it and let them know how you're feeling.
Try to be, as much as you can, open to people around you. So your closest friends, your family, or anyone that's dear to you. If you're not feeling great or if you need some help, ask for it, because people will not guess it. And of course, sometimes they will, but in most occasions, people cannot always know what's going on in your head. And it can be so nice to have a good support system. So definitely, if you are a fellow perfectionist, do try to reach out and get that help if you need it.
I think that's a really good point. And then normally we end this episode with a golden tip. But maybe here the takeaway is that there is no golden tip. Like, we are all different and there's not one solution that is perfect for just about everyone. But I think that by experiencing and going through life and experiencing failure, that you eventually learn to better deal with these perfectionistic tendencies. And it's all about accepting that there is no perfect life, no perfect solution, no golden tip.
It's a very, very deep ending, but I think it's true. Nothing's going to work for everyone, and just stay true to yourself and what works for you as well. So, Sana, thank you for being so open today.
Yeah, you too.
And with our listeners.
And with that, thank you to the audience for listening to our podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode.